Hello, everybody, and welcome to our web discussion. We're really glad you were able to join us today. So we have fairly recently finished our first full year of Fidelity assessment, and we're now in year 2. And we know from reports that local systems submitted at the end of year 1 that most local systems have done at least some Fidelity observation in addition to the self-assessment piece. So our purpose today is really to understand from the Fidelity observers' point of view what that experience was like over the first year. And our goal really is to understand that so we know if we need to make improvements to the process or develop or adapt some additional resources or supports for you in your role as a Fidelity observer. So I'm Kyla Patterson. I'm the Early Intervention Team Leader at the Infant and Toddler Connection of Virginia State Office. And I'm joined today by Dana Childress. Dana, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Like Kyla said, I'm Dana. I work with the Partnership for People with Disabilities as part of the professional development team. And so I've also been on the work group that's been helping to develop the coaching and action checklist and some of the process. So I'm really interested today to get your feedback on how that's been going for you.
Great. Thanks, Dana. Yeah, and exactly. She and I have both been a part of that Fidelity assessment stakeholder group process, and so we are really excited to have this opportunity to talk with you today. Oh, and I forgot to advance the slide, so there we are. And we'll move right on. So we wanted to start with just a quick poll to see if you remember when all of this began, when we started our statewide implementation of Fidelity assessment. So if you use your polling feature, and I see some folks have already found it, but up in the participant box under your name are 4 boxes. The one on the far right has a lowercase a. You can click there and then select your choice. And no worries, just make your best guess if you don't remember. I sometimes can't remember why I've walked into the next room, so I certainly understand. Time goes by quickly and it can be hard to remember. I'll give you just another few seconds. All right, I think we'll go ahead and close that poll. And most folks have selected B, October 1st, 2017, and that's exactly right. That's when we began our statewide implementation of this process. So we wanted to, over the next few slides, just to do a quick review of the basic who, what, when, and how of the whole process, just to be sure we're all on the same page as we then move into some discussion items. So first, thinking about who needs to complete Fidelity assessment. So just a reminder that it is required for all certified early intervention professionals and early intervention specialists who provide services other than eligibility determination and assessment. So that means service coordinators are not included in this process right now if that's their only role, nor are providers who do only eligibility determination and or assessment. And then Dana mentioned that we've been part of the stakeholder group that worked to develop this coaching and action checklist. So this is our Fidelity tool for coaching in Virginia, and it's the tool that we use for both self-assessment and for observation. And then in terms of kind of what's involved and when it happens, so we talked about the fact that we started on October 1st, 2017. So providers who have entered our system or become practitioners on or after that date are required in their first year of employment to complete 2 self-assessments and be observed at least once by a qualified observer. And then the same requirements are there for their second year of employment. And beyond that, it's up to the practitioner and their supervisor to make it kind of an individualized decision about what happens in terms of fidelity assessment after that point. And then we know we have a whole group of folks who were practitioners already before October 1st. And so the requirements are similar for that group. They do need to complete 2 self-assessments. They needed to complete 2 self-assessments in the first year of our implementation of this process, and 2 self-assessments now in this second year. The difference is that they have a 2-year period in which to be observed at least once by a qualified fidelity observer. And that 2-year period for completing the observation piece was allowed because we knew there were a lot of providers already in the system, and it was going to take some time to complete all of those observations. And so that's why at the beginning I mentioned that most, but not all, local systems had completed some observations by the end of that first year of implementation. And I did mention that providers had to be observed by a qualified fidelity observer, so I wanted to make sure everybody remembers what that means. And there are 3 ways to qualify as a fidelity observer. So the first is that you could be a master coach. Or secondly, you could be qualified because you've been coaching for at least 6 months and have completed at least 8 hours of professional development related to coaching. And then the third option is you could be qualified because you have at least 4 months of experience providing coaching, at least 4 hours of professional development related to coaching, and you've been approved by a master coach or another qualified observer. And then the other requirement to remember is that regardless of which of those 3 criteria you meet, you also have to complete the Texas coaching module in accordance with Virginia's instructions and materials. And just a reminder that you can find all of that information as far as those instructions related materials, the link to that coaching module in the provider section of the infantva.org website. So that is a quick review, but before we move on then to the discussion piece of this web discussion, are there any questions about that review information? If there are, just go ahead and you can type those in the chat now or at any point. There might be one person typing, so I'm going to give just a second to see if something pops up here. Okay. All right, then we're going to move on. I'm going to turn it over to Dana to get us on to our discussion questions.
All right, thanks, Kyla. Maybe that's a good sign that there weren't a lot of questions about how the process is supposed to work. That could be a good sign, right?
Right.
All right, guys, so we've kind of had that review, kind of reviewed what we're supposed to be doing. Now what we wanted to do is move into shifting gears about what you have been doing. So we've got, you're going to see as we move through the next couple of slides, we've got some polls, some different ways for you to communicate with us and let us know how things are working for you. You always have your chat feature to give us details, and so this is really your time to shine, your time to give us your feedback about what's working, what's not working, and just your thoughts about, what kind of support you needed, as Kyla mentioned. So first here we wanted to start at the beginning, right, and to find out who is conducting fidelity observations in your program. You have another poll, A through D options. Again, you're going to look to the left of your slide in your participant box. Look at that lowercase a box underneath your name. Hover your cursor or click on that box to click. That way you'll have your drop-down menu and you can make your choice. So as I read over my notes this morning, I realized that this poll really probably ought to have had an all of the above option. So, you can click local system managers, in-house staff, contracted staff, and certainly others. If you want to click others, please type in the chat and let us know who those others are. If your answer is really all of the above, you can type that in the chat and let us know that way too. So I see we've got a couple of people have answered, but some more answers are coming in. And I see some folks are typing, so I'm going to give you a second to get your answers in. Yeah, Fairfax, y'all were one of the people I was thinking of that probably would fit in the all of the above category. Thanks, Beth. I see you put your answer in chat. That's always another option. Lynn has hers, local system manager and C, and contracted staff. Okay. Well, Jeannie, do you mind publishing the poll, and let's see how that shook out too. Hi, Stacy. So Stacy's got similar to Lynn, local system manager and the contract provider lead for Stanton. Okay, thanks, Stacy. Let's see. So according to our poll, we have 4 folks that said system managers, 1 said in-house staff, a couple with contracted providers and entities. So this is kind of what I was expecting, a combination of folks. And Leslie looks like she put C as contracted staff too. And that's okay. You know, really you guys determine who's going to be your Fidelity observers based on those guidelines that Kyla shared with us. So thanks for providing that kind of input. Let's think again about answer another who question next. Who's been observed? So here what I want you to do is use your drawing tool. So your drawing tool is located in the vertical toolbar that's right up against your participant box. If you look at that vertical toolbar, the 3rd box from the top looks like a little crayon or a pen. Click on that crayon, then move your cursor over to the slide, and you can, it looks like somebody's making dots. You can make dots, you can make lines, draw a check mark, and just check, yep, somebody did a check mark in new practitioners. Let us know which ones has been observed in your system. We know there'll be overlap. We know that you might have experienced folks who are also contracted. That's okay. We just wanted to get to hear from you about who has been observed. I love it. Somebody's really good at the pen. They've even done hearts. You guys have picked springtime colors. That makes me happy. I'm sort of eager for springtime. I went out in the sun today. I was like, oh, it's finally sunny, and it was freezing, but it's sunny, so I'll take it. So it looks like we've got a pretty equal distribution: new folks, experienced practitioners, in-house staff, and contracted staff. And 1 person put a big check in students. That one is interesting to me. I'd love to know how you're using it with students. Maybe whoever typed that, if that can type it into chat for me. So it looks like nobody else has put anything with others, and that's okay. We just wanted to, you know, give you the option if there was anybody that we missed. So this looks like it's Fidelity observations being done with lots of different types of folks, which is great. We're going to dig in even a little further as we move through, and we want to hear specifically about those experiences in more detail in just a minute. Thank you, guys. Thanks for all those colors. You got the hang of that. So next we wanted to find out, how have you conducted Fidelity observation? So as you know, you've got some options. We're thinking probably a lot of Fidelity assessment, Fidelity observation happens on visits where your observer is joining, sitting in the room, kind of acting like a fly on the wall and watching what's happening. But we know you also have the option to do a video observation where the visit is recorded, and then the Fidelity observer watches the video and completes the checklist later. Maybe you've done it both ways. So we wanted to get your opinion here. So you can either use your drawing tool and draw a mark on either a picture or the both in the middle, or you can use your pointer tool. The pointer tool is in that vertical toolbar. It's the box above the little crayon you just used. Click that pointer tool, and then you move your cursor to the screen to click again to drop that little star icon. It looks like that's what several of you are using, either on the picture of the visit, the picture of the video, or on both. And know that you can only drop 1 pointer. So if you have used both, put your little smiley face on the both icon, or just draw those marks. If you have any trouble with the tools, you've always got the chat as a backup, so feel free to write in there. All right, it looks like kind of like I was expecting. A lot of marks are going on the cute little home visit there. We have 1 person that's used both, and I see a icon is popped in and out on the video piece, which is kind of what I'd expected. So I'm curious, those of you who have done Fidelity observation by joining visits, do you usually complete the checklist during the visit, or do you complete the checklist after the visit? Tell me in chat, how does that work for you while you're actually in the visit? So type that in the chat for me and let me know, how are you completing the checklist? While you're there, afterwards, when you get back to the office? How's that working? The Goochland Power 10 says we do it afterwards. Fairfax says during the visit and then you schedule an appointment to discuss it. Good, thank you. Beth says during. Thanks, Beth. Stacy says I take notes on each section, complete the checklist afterwards, then meet with staff to discuss. So that's helpful, Stacy. So you're kind of just jotting some notes and then looking at the checklist in more detail later. Muff says, hi Muff, says both during and after. I like to take a bunch of notes of specific examples. So Muff, how does that help you? You take all those notes of specific examples. I'm curious, how do you use those to fill the checklist out later? That's such a great idea. Let's see, Loudon says, hi Ellen, the observer completes the checklist immediately afterwards, then we schedule that follow-up appointment. So you guys I'm going to ask you more about follow-up in just a minute. I'm so glad to hear you've already got that as an ingrained part of your process. So Karen and Becky say they complete it during the visit, and then afterwards they'll meet to discuss taking lots of notes. Okay, great. So I'm curious about something else. For many of you completing it during the visit, what do you say to the parent? How does the parent know what your role is there as the fidelity observer? Because, you know, I would think as a parent, I would think, ooh, are they taking notes about me? So I'm curious, how do you guys set that up when you go on that visit for the parent? Oh, okay, BBVI educators, you guys do it. It says, oh, let me see, both during and after the visit. Okay. So tell me, how do you guys make sure the parent is in the loop or knows what's happening or is feeling comfortable with the process? Because the parent's certainly part of that process. Maybe not so much your reporting out of your observations, but being in the room, we certainly want to make sure they're okay. Fairfax says the primary service provider prepares the parent in advance. Okay. And that certainly would be important for that practitioner to give the parent a heads up and make sure that they're okay with that observer joining the visit. Yeah, Mel, I think we were on the same wavelength there. She said our provider meets with the family initially to make sure they're okay if I come, and discuss that I'm there to support the provider. Yeah, that's a great point, Muff. So let the parent know that you're there to support the provider. You're not there to judge anything that's happening on the visit or certainly to take notes about the family. You're just there as a support. So Stacy says similarly, the provider prepares and discusses why and how ahead of time. Yep, make sure it's okay with the parent. Loudon says we're gain permission from the parent prior to scheduling and explain that process. Yeah, and that the focus is on the provider. That's a good point, Ellen. Hi, Mary Lou. Says provider talks with the family before, lets them know who's coming and why. Good. You guys are right on target with that. That's great. I just wanted to, I'm not surprised at all you've got process in place. I just wanted to see what you guys were doing. Let me see. Karen and Becky said sounds like the same kind of thing. Hi, Molly. So the provider informs the family somebody will be joining to observe and support. Great. Beth says, ask the parent events and try to convince them this is an observation of the adult. Yeah, I would imagine still having that fidelity observer in the room could change the interaction a little bit, Beth, so you might even need to reinforce for the parent that that person is there as a support to the practitioner, not to be observing the child or the parent in any way. Yep. All right, guys. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. Let me check in before we go. There was one or two people that said both or video. For those of you observing through video, how does that work for you? Type into chat and let us know how you're doing video observation. Is the practitioner using his or her cell phone to record the video? How does that video file get to the supervisor? Tell me, how does the video observation work? Looks like I have maybe 3 marks for the both, so let me know how's that worked for you. Because I know some programs it's okay, you know, they're allowed to videotape. Some programs don't allow it, so certainly that wouldn't be an option for there. But I'm curious when you have used it, what it's looked like. Goochland Palatine is asking, do the parents sign a release? So that would be a great question to hear. I would certainly think so, Goochland Palatine, if there's going to be videotaping happening in the home. I think that would be a good practice. Beth says using cell phones and often need more information from the provider. Okay. So Beth, when you said they're using the cell phone and then you have to check in and talk to the provider some more before you fill out the form, is that what you mean by need more information? Yeah, Fairfax says using their phone and then you watch it together. Okay, that's a different way to think and do it than I was thinking about. That's a great idea. Our families have a video photo release. Okay, so that helps answer Goochland Palatine's question. Corey says, curious if anyone has tried FaceTime. Or yeah, you could do FaceTime, Google Hangout, any kind of a conferencing technology, so you could, the observer could actually observe in real time but not be present. That's a good question, Corey. That would be an interesting one to see. Beth says yes, the video is losing some of the nuances, so that's why you check in and talk with some more information from that provider. Yeah, there's nothing like actually being present. Video is, the next best thing, but I can see what you mean, Beth, by maybe having to check back in. All right, thank you guys. That helped us go through just kind of how that observation works. So next what I want to do, we're going to start with the positive. So I want to know what kind of positive experiences have you had with using the coaching and action checklist for observation purposes. So think about it, positive experiences for your program, maybe positive experiences for the practitioner that was being observed, and you might also think about you as a Fidelity observer. How did it help you? What did you learn? Tell us about it in chat. I know that's kind of a big picture question, so I'm gonna try to stay quiet a few more seconds so that you guys can process that and organize your thoughts and get that into chat. We were just talking earlier about, I was talking on another little course I'm teaching about becoming comfortable with silence, and it's always something I think a presenter is working on too, me included. Okay, so ITC Fairfax says, allows us to see patterns and make plans. So Fairfax, what kind of patterns might you see, or maybe what kind of patterns have you seen? That's a great observation, a great, it could be a really great program-wide kind of support. Goochland Hallerson makes us more self-aware at the following visits, yep, and I think that's a benefit, Goochland, for the practitioner and the observer. Probably I can see how that could be for both. Beth says really helpful with new staff, especially those that are new to coaching. And Beth, I imagine that could be a little scary as a new person to get observed pretty soon, but what a great support to kind of have somebody to be guiding you right from the beginning. Let's see, Fairfax says, for each of our vendor agencies, they've developed their plan to follow Fidelity based on their own results. Oh, I see. So that's great. So they're being responsive to their results and they're planning ahead. That's great. Hi, Krishana. She provides an opportunity to identify provider strengths and blind spots. So, Krishana, I'm curious, what are you guys doing about those blind spots? And we're going to talk about some of that, but that's a great word that you used. How can you address those when they pop up? Yeah, Lisa says a good reminder of gaps in support. Fairfax is increasing the reflective questions, so that's one of those patterns you found. Yeah, and Fairfax, I've heard that across the state that folks are trying to, that's sort of a point of improvement. People are trying to get better at either using more of them, figuring out when to use them, which kinds of questions are helpful. Yep, really just figuring out how to facilitate more of that reflection. Lynn says, interesting to see how differences in how services are provided now compared to when her own child was receiving services. Yeah. I bet, Lynn. I can even think about it with my little one. Like, gosh, he's not little, he's 6'2". He's taller than me. When he was in EI, when he was just a couple months old, things have definitely evolved, haven't they? Stacy says identifying strengths across the program and folks who might be helpful in mentoring. Oh, what a great idea, Stacy. So when you find some of those strengths, you could maybe link those up with some of the folks that are maybe having some of those blind spots, like Krishana talked about, and have some peer-to-peer support. I love that idea. Fairfax says decrease intentional modeling. Fairfax, I feel you there. There's a lot of modeling that still goes on, and it's sort of like how do we transition from most modeling to modeling when it's appropriate, right, and then more caregiver practice, more opportunities for the caregiver to take the lead. That's what pops up to me when I see your comment. Karen and Becky said, it reminds me that each of the components of the checklist are happening at different times during the visit. Helps me listen for questions and share during discussion. Yeah, what happens on the visit doesn't go top to bottom, does it? It's not like, I mean, maybe you do start with that joint plan check-in, but you could be in reflection or action practice or feedback at all kinds of different points. I think it does, hopefully does make us a better observer. Muff said it helped to identify areas of needed strength and support. Yes, the reflective questioning is big in our area to look at initially, focused on our interactions with the family. So Muff, you're not alone. I think those looking at reflective questioning, I bet a lot of folks on here, that's just something I think people are trying to build, and I'm hearing that in the adult learning course I'm teaching. Folks are really trying to be more aware of how they use those questions to get the family more actively engaged. It's a great reflection point for the provider too. All right, awesome. So let's switch. Oh, go ahead, Kyla.
That's okay. I was just going to add that one of the interesting things I saw when local systems submitted their end of year sort of summary of Fidelity for the first year, someone had commented that a number of practitioners in their local system who had been observed realized how beneficial it could be to be the observer. And so not necessarily as a qualified Fidelity observer yet, but we're asking for opportunities to then do peer observation of a colleague so that they could learn as the observer from watching somebody else using that coaching in action checklist. I don't know if anybody else had that experience, but I thought I would just share that comment that we got.
Yeah, I love that. And I think observation is, we talk about it all the time for us observing families and their daily routines, but how powerful is it for us to allow somebody to observe us and to welcome that feedback? I think that's a when I think about as a professional development team member, we're always asked for videos. We need to see what it looks like. Well, when you guys can take advantage of what it's looking like in your system, and maybe even like Stacy suggested, pair up based on their strengths and where people want to develop skills, I think that's a great idea. Whether, like you said, whether it's truly part of the more formal Fidelity assessment process or just your own growth and development, it's a great idea. Let's see. All right, guys, so now let's think about, I'm glad you've had lots of positive experiences, and it sounds like they're growth kind of experiences, which is great. So now let's think about, I love this guy, I think he's so funny. What challenges have you experienced with using the checklist for observation? So I want you to really focus on that use of the checklist for the observation piece. Think about the challenges that you have had, or maybe you've heard others in your program have talked about, but also think about, share those with us, and I'd love to hear if you've come up with a way to overcome that challenge or you're working on getting around that challenge. Let us know that too. So good, I see several folks are typing. Okay, Fairfax said scheduling a time to get it done. Yeah, you've got a lot to coordinate, don't you, between the observer, the practitioner, the family. Yeah, and you're probably scheduling it within other duties that you have as well. I don't remember, Kyla, did that kind of thing come up on the survey data? Did we ask about these kinds of challenges? I can't remember.
Yeah, when we did the survey, of course, most of the folks we heard from at that point had used it as a self-assessment rather than as, as an observation. So, no, we didn't get a lot of that kind of feedback. Okay, I just couldn't remember. Yeah, it's definitely different when you think about it as a self-assessment. I've used it on myself as self-assessment on the little developmental services I've done outside of this role, and it really was really different to be thinking about yourself versus observing someone else. So I'm glad folks are giving us that feedback here. Let's see. Goochland said, we still have parents who aren't on board with coaching. They want us to drive as experts, and some don't want the responsibility of being an agent of change. So Goochland, that sounds like a challenge with intervention provision, doesn't it? It sounds like that. So I'm wondering, how is that affecting the use of the checklist for observation for you? Is it hard for your practitioners to feel like they're using coaching in the way they'd like to because they're still trying to help families understand why to use it? I mean, I can see the link there, but I'm curious about if you take it a little further and connect it to that observation piece. Help me there. Stacy, implementing steps to address challenges observed in the program, the actual implementation of steps to address challenges found through the process. Okay. So Stacy, it's been challenging for you to figure out how to implement some of those to address those challenges program-wide. Yeah. It's I think when you can find those patterns and address them across the program,
then you could hopefully get people helping each other, right? And I would love to hear, I think Fairfax put in there that you guys were having some of your vendors address that. So if you have any thoughts about Stacy's comment, I'd love to see those in chat too. Let's see, Loud and Ellen said, sometimes the provider sees it as a scorecard, and also it can be limiting to your reflective process depending on the interest level of thought regarding your coaching practice. Let me read that again, Ellen. So some providers are feeling kind of graded by it, it sounds like. So I wonder, Ellen, if you have any thoughts about how to overcome that. Maybe when you've done the follow-up piece with the practitioner, I'd love to know how are you talking with them to help them see it from the perspective of professional development. Because I get it. It can be intimidating to be observed and to have somebody else tell you what they think. Let's see, Krishana says, her blind spot response. For example, a provider might not be aware of their tendency to use more directives or their tendency to model without allowing the parent to participate. These types of blind spots can be reviewed. Oh, that's good. I love that you brought in reflective supervision, Krishana, can use to assist the provider in identifying ways to enhance their coaching practices and language to use for reflective questioning. So that reflective supervision I think that's a tool that can be used to maybe help practitioners not only reflect on themselves, but maybe reflect on the benefits of the whole process. Yeah. Guchin says there's some frustration of coaching without the give and take that naturally comes in other visits. Some don't want these tough visits observed. Yeah, believe me, Guchin, I get that. I would think people would want to pick my best visits for somebody to come on and observe, because you can't help but feel like, it is a reflection on your practices. But I think that's part of what the notes column is built for, Guchin, is like if the visit is hard or the child is cranky because he didn't sleep well, or there is no intention to have a judgment of you're doing your practices right or wrong, more of just an opportunity to think about how am I supporting the families and how could I do that even better. Let's see, Beth, you want to give the provider a yes if they do it at all. But the way I understand the instructions, you have to give a no if they don't always do it. Kind of discouraging. Or am I misunderstanding the directions? I'm going to punt this one to Kyla, because Kyla, you and I talked about this and you did a nice job of discussing this. Do you mind addressing Beth's comment?
Sure, no problem. And this may be, when we get to the end, we're going to be asking for some suggestions about additional information or support to you all as Fidelity assessment, our Fidelity observers, and this might be a piece of information that we can clarify for everybody. It is a yes/no. So if they are using it, then it is a yes, and your comments column can reflect whether there were also missed opportunities, and they can continue to work on that consistency. And I think the question that had come up, Dana, that you brought up was one where maybe there was not a lot of opportunity to see that, but when you did see it, they did it. So yeah, I mean, it is a challenge, and I think it is potentially an area where we could do a better job of getting some information out to folks so that you're answering those in a consistent way.
Thanks, Kyla. I appreciate that. I know Kyla and I talked about a question came up recently too that I'll share with you guys, and it was about what if the practitioner attempts to do the activity or maybe offers a reflection question or offers an opportunity for the parent to practice, but the parent chooses not to. Do you count it as a yes or no? And we talked about it, and it would, in that situation, you would count as a yes because the practitioner did create the opportunity. They did try to use the strategy, and if the parent decided not to participate in that way, then we still, at least if the practitioner offered the opportunity, you can still check yes. So that was a helpful clarification for me.
Yeah, and as I'm thinking, Dana, too, I'm thinking this really probably is something we could work on some additional information about, because I do know, I'm trying to think now through the checklist, and some of them, the yes/no question thing, that one for me is hard to say yes if they asked 40 questions during the visit and one of them was an open-ended question, whereas that, more of the action practice or some of the reflective pieces, there may only be a couple of times that was appropriate. And if they did it once, then I'd be more inclined to say yes in that circumstance. So, Yeah, thanks for raising that question because I think it's something we could work on.
Yeah, I agree. And it's almost like there is some clinical judgment in place for the Fidelity observer, because you're right, what the context is for that visit contributes, I think, too. So yeah, I'm thinking about that too, Kyla. Maybe there's some way we can take some scenarios, or even what you guys are typing into chat will give us great food for thought when we think about clarifying. So thank you. Let's see, Mary Lou said she found she needs a third choice at sometimes, not just yes or no, maybe a partial or somewhat. Currently, I clarify in the notes section, but it's been hard to choose between yes and no at times. I know that one, we asked for some feedback on that Fidelity survey, Kyla. I don't know if you want to jump in and talk about that. Yep.
Yeah, so that one, we, on the Fidelity survey that we did back in, gosh, Dana, was it August, I think, as we were probably 9 or so months, 10 months into the first year.
Yep.
And that was interesting. So it was split almost exactly 50-50 among the 100 and some folks who responded to that survey, whether people liked the yes-no option or preferred a third or a Likert scale kind of option. So we took that data to the Fidelity Assessment stakeholder group that's been working with us for a couple of years now on developing the whole checklist and the process. And their recommendation, which we accepted, was to keep the yes-no option. Since there was not an overwhelming majority asking to change, keeping the yes-no allowed us to have comparable data now moving forward. If we had changed it, then this baseline set of data would sort of be out the window because it wouldn't be comparable to later data. And also because I think folks felt like there's been a lot of change, there's a lot of new stuff, and a lot of folks really liked the simplicity of just the two options. So at this point, we are not planning to change that. Hopefully we can, with some additional guidance and technical assistance around that yes answer, as Beth has suggested, and then maybe some tips about that notes and comments column, which we'll talk a little bit more about today. Hopefully we can address some of that kind of rub that happens with the yes-no choice.
All right, thanks, Kylie. Yeah, it looks like we have a couple other comments addressing the yes-no, then said it feels too limiting, best as a third choice. So it's really helpful feedback for you guys to have. And we'll keep looking at the checklist over time, so keep giving us this kind of feedback. I think it's good to continue to hear as people are using it even more and more over time. I think this is really helpful, so we'll keep thinking about that. Let's see, Fairfax said incorporate activities into staff meetings, have people develop personal goals. So that's some of the things you're doing to help address some of those blind spots and challenges. Let's see, Ellen says, we both complete the coaching and action checklist, and during the reflective coaching process, we do not go through it in an orderly manner from top to bottom, but use it as a framework for discussion. Essential part is to have a conversational follow-up. Yeah, I think that you make a great point, Ellen. The checklist in and of itself is really just a tool. It's what happens around the checklist for that professional growth and support that really matters. I think that's a great point. Let's see, Molly adds, sometimes parents engage in action practice without the provider inviting them to do so. Sometimes the parents reflect without the provider asking a question. Would these examples be yes or no? What do you think, Kyla? That's a good question. It's also a good question because I'm wondering, Molly, sometimes those happen because a provider might have been working with the family for a while and sort of set this up, that this is how they naturally interact. And I think when that's going well over time, parent gets it and doesn't have to be prompted for those interactions. So those seem like yeses to me, but I want to see what Kyla says.
Yeah, I would lean that way too, Dana, especially because we have said yes with that around the joint planning piece at the starting at the start of the visit, and we had some examples where folks were saying because they've been using coaching that they no longer need to ask at the beginning of the session what the parent wants to work on, that the parent introduces that conversation. So I think I would be inclined to mark yes and put something in the notes and comments column that reflected what happened.
All right, great, thank you. That's what I was thinking too. All right, guys. I'll see Lynn. I see your note, Lynn. Thank you. We'll just we'll look for Jennifer's input as she goes as we go through. Any other challenges that you want to tell us about at this point? Right, I don't see anybody typing, but feel free to keep to put anything in there if there's something else you'd like us to know. We're also going to have a little more opportunities at the end for you to share anything that's popped up for you between now and then. All right, so we've talked a little bit about this already, how you're using the notes column. As we've talked about, that's really a great place to clarify, to take, like Muff said, really detailed information so that you can refer to it later. It helps you justify why you chose the yes or no. I'm going to invite any other comments about how you're using that yes-no column. Do you find that you almost need more space because you're writing a lot there? Or tell me what kinds of things you are capturing in that column. What are you writing in there? Okay, I see a couple of folks typing. I think the notes column could almost be longer or bigger somehow. I think it's a great place to capture, like somebody said earlier, the nuances of the visit, the context. Oh, Fairfax says reminders to herself, quote challenges, yep. Best of specific examples, so maybe best specific things you've seen during the visit, maybe those opportunities, or even like Kyla said, some of those missed opportunities. Mary Lou says, I use it to clarify or to list examples, yep. So Mary Lou, when you say clarify, tell me what you mean. Do you mean clarify why you chose the yes or no, or what do you mean by clarify? Fairfax says, yep, ways we could have done it. Yep, Mary Lou says yes, so clarify. Okay, thanks, Mary Lou. Stacy says she might write quotes. I think somebody said that earlier. Quote, specific observations heard or observed during the visit. Yeah, I like that idea of quotes, Stacy. That's kind of a good idea because especially when you capture that practitioner maybe facilitating that reflection or giving a really strong feedback statement to the family. There's a lot of power in seeing or hearing your own words, and I can imagine practitioners, it could be a point of, wow, you know, that went well. It could also be used if there's a time when there was a missed opportunity and you catch that moment in that quote or that description, and that's a point for reflection later. So Karen and Becky said the specific open-ended questions I hear, listing examples. Muff says I run out of the room sometimes and then use the Texas coaching model instrument as it has room to take notes. Oh, you run out of room. Muff, I have to tell you, I was having one of those moments. I was thinking, why does Muff run out of the room? You mean run out of room in your notes column. I got you. I list examples including sample questions. Yep, great. Ellen says documentation of specific examples of coaching. Good, you guys. Definitely use conversation quotes. Best says missed opportunities. Great. Yep. Quotes, questions, examples observed. Missed opportunities so you can reflect with the provider following the session. Good. Thanks. That's a great segue to where we're going next. Yeah, quotes also help with the conversation later if you can't meet right away. Yeah, it helps you remember, doesn't it? Jog your memory. Yep. I use it to give examples of what's asked on the checklist. Yep, what's been going in the session and how that's been going. Good. All right, guys. Well, I have, you kind of gave me a nice segue into our next question. So how does feedback work after it? Some of you, it sounds like you were meeting afterwards. I'm curious, how do you provide that feedback? And maybe you've mentioned it in chat. I think some of you mentioned reflective supervision, scheduling a visit after. Let me ask you this then. How soon after the observation do you typically give feedback? Are you able to give it within a couple days? Do you meet later that same day? I'm wondering about that because there's a little bit of research I've come across that says when we're providing feedback after an observation or even after somebody has, even after you've maybe done a video observation, if you can give it within a week, it tends to be more powerful. If it goes much beyond a week after the event, the practitioner is typically, like Stacey was mentioning, kind of forgotten what they did. Beth says try to meet within a week. Yeah. Let's see. Lisa says I've received it within the week. And Fairfax says for internal staff, we set up one-on-one meetings as quickly as your schedules. Mary Lou says, usually immediately after or later the same day. So that's great, Mary Lou, when you can be that immediate. I think that can probably be pretty powerful. Ellen says, try to schedule it within 2 to 3 days so we both have time and space, but not too long to recall the details. So Ellen, you make a good point. Giving a little space between the observation and the meeting might help you both process that information. So I can see that what you mean by that time and space. Let's see, we schedule the observation and feedback sessions ahead of time so if we don't meet right afterwards, it's within 3 days. That's a great tip, Stacy, to make sure you schedule both rather than just do the observation and then schedule the feedback. Muff says we immediately schedule it directly after the visit, minimum of 15 minutes. And contractors will sometimes sit in the car. Yeah, especially if they don't have a lot of time. Yeah, that car ride can be really helpful. It can be great. One thing I would wonder, Muff, I would recommend if you have the opportunity to like pull around the corner, go to Starbucks nearby or the Walmart parking lot or 7-Eleven so that family doesn't feel like, uh-oh, are they sitting in the car talking about me? Which, of course, you wouldn't be doing. You're talking about the observation. But I love the idea of doing that. That is really immediate, right, in the car. So Karen and Becky said, after the observation, send an email with a brief summary and then usually meet within a week. If not right after. So great, thank you guys. That helps me get a sense, and I think you've given some different ideas for ways to do that. So let me hear from supervisors. How are you using the checklist for supervision? And system managers, are you in the loop so you're getting that feedback from the Fidelity observers and you can integrate that in supervision? How do you guys connect the dots so you're staying in the loop? Those of you that are supervisors. And I guess those of you that aren't supervisors, you go ahead and let us know, because the next question is, if you're not a supervisor, how are you closing that feedback loop to make sure the supervisor is aware? So tell me about that, both of those questions from either perspective that fits you. How do you close the loop with the supervisor? Because, we know one of the things that we know in professional development, and our team thinks about a lot, is any professional development that happens, and I think about the Fidelity assessment process as a professional development process, the most important variable is support from the supervisor for that practitioner to be successful on an ongoing basis in using that practice. So you guys who are supervisors, you play a really important role in this whole Fidelity process, even if you aren't the one doing the observation. Let's see. So folks are starting to come in. Our program, Gucci says, I'm one of the observers and one of the observed, so I'm in it. Wow, so you are all three. You're an assistant manager, observer, and one of the observed. So good. It's good. It's probably a little hard to be juggling being all in that, but that's great. So you really get firsthand experience from all those different perspectives. She said, but we also factor this into supervision. Karen and Becky said agency directors, supervisors comment on observations and self-assessments prior to turning them in to the LSM. So it sounds like you've got a system set up that it funnels through the supervisor or director before it goes to the system manager, so multiple people are aware. That's a great idea. Beth said the LSM collected the data and noted differences in raters. Oh, that's interesting, Beth. What happened after that, Beth? Did your system manager, how did she address those differences in raters? Did that result in some more training? I'm curious. It's interesting. Oh, that's okay, Leslie. I'm glad you were able to join us. Hope your evaluation goes well. Let's see, Beth says, raters meeting to clarify the tool and attending this. Well, good, Beth. I'm so glad. That's a great insight, and good for you on your system manager to be looking across not only for patterns of those strengths and blind spots, but also looking for the use of the tool. Loudon says, Ellen says, I provide Fidelity observations for some of the staff I supervise. However, she tries to make a clear distinction of her role in the moment. Yeah. It's then conveyed to respected supervisor and system manager. Good, so you're kind of closing that loop there, Ellen. Great. Well, good. I think you guys have got some plans in place to make sure that loop closes. All right, guys, so we're going to start heading towards our wrap-up. I see we've got about 12 minutes left. I wanted to give you the opportunity to fill in the blank. Is there anything else you think we need to know about Fidelity observation? that maybe we didn't ask you about today or we didn't touch on? Anything else you want us to know about your experiences as Fidelity observers, or maybe being observed, filling out the tool, anything else? I know that's kind of a big question. So we've got a couple people typing. Okay, so Karen and Betsy asked, what happens after this initial 2-year period? Kyla, do you want to weigh in on that one?
Sure. So after the 2-year period, either for a new employee or someone who's an existing practitioner, when we started this on October 1st, it then becomes an individualized decision between that practitioner and their supervisor to decide what additional Fidelity assessment needs to happen and with what frequency. So, you know, we would hope that's a data-driven decision based on what you've seen from the self-assessment and the observation and your conversations with that practitioner, whether they would be helpful to continue some self-assessments, do some more observation, whatever that particular person would need. We would certainly encourage that everybody continue at least to do some self-assessments, because what we know from implementation science is that unless you continue to pay attention, it can be easy to slip back into sort of old habits. And so in order to sustain those practices, you want to continue to pay attention to them in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love the idea of just embedding this tool or this process in supervision somehow. So it's a great way to just help your providers and to keep on track, because it is easy to slip back into that more traditional way of doing business. So let me ask you one final question today. What additional information or support do you need as a Fidelity observer? So what can we do to help you and your staff be successful with Fidelity observation? Any ideas? Lisa says she tries to do informal self-assessments regularly. Having the checklist makes it more cohesive. Good, I'm glad to hear that, Lisa. I have heard folks say that they keep a copy in their working folders and they'll fill it out after visits periodically just to almost check in on their own process, which I think would be a great thing to help prepare them for being observed. So yeah, absolutely, continuing to use it as a self-assessment can be a real help too. See, Krishana is asking, how are other agencies with contracted providers using the observation checklist for quality assurance? That's a good question, Krishana. I'd love for folks, other agencies with contracted providers to pipe in and share in the chat. What I've heard, Krishana, some of the things I've heard is that other providers are really responsible for this process. Some system managers are having their contracted providers really coordinate and take care of the Fidelity observations and then report the information to the system managers. But I don't know, I haven't heard more detail than that. I don't know, Kyla, if you've heard more, if you have anything to add to Krishana's question.
I really do not at this point.
Yeah, but I think it's a great one. And Krishana, I'd encourage you to reach out to system manager contacts and see if you can, or even through COA to see if you can get some, just some other opinions. It's a great question as you're trying to figure out how to do that in your system. Let's see, Fairfax says they would love some more clarification about when yes and no is appropriate. Yep. Beth said more videos. I knew somebody who would have to say it, Beth. I'm glad you did. We do know of a few other states that are developing some coaching videos, and we're really excited about that. So as soon as those become available, we're hoping to be able to link. We've been told by the other states that they'll be free and available for other states to use. So we hear you, and we're hoping to take advantage of some resources other states are developing. We also have it on our radar. And I can't resist, if you guys have rock star coaches in your localities who would be comfortable with us coming along to videotape them, please email me and let me know. Let the professional development team members know, and we'd love to work with them. Beth agrees, more clarification of when it's a yes and when it's a no. Fairfax says, oh, Krishana, maybe this is an answer to your question. They've written it into their contract. That might be, Krishana says, yeah, thanks for the feedback. So maybe that Fairfax and Krishana could get linked up about that. Of course, says that makes me happy to, yep, let us know, guys. We can certainly take care. We can certainly come and join. we'd love to tag along. All right, well, with our last few minutes, I'm going to turn it back over to Kyla to share a resource with you, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, so I'm really sharing a Fairfax resource. So it's a really, really good resource we wanted to be sure everybody was aware of, and we are thankful to the Infant and Toddler Connection of Fairfax Falls Church for being willing to share it with everyone. Dana has put a link in the chat to get to this on the EIPD website. But basically, this is designed in a way that's really similar to that looks like, doesn't look like document that was developed around the key principles of early intervention, if you're familiar with that. But this one outlines the kind of the key concepts of fidelity assessment, covering all 5 of the coaching characteristics. And so as you can see on screen, each concept is really illustrated by describing what it looks like and doesn't look like in practice. And we wanted to highlight this because we think it's a really great potential training tool for new staff or a refresher for experienced staff. And we think it's a great companion to the Coaching in Action checklist and will help support consistency both for those who are using the checklist as a self-assessment and for those who might be doing some observation. So I am curious whether folks on the phone or on the webinar have seen or used this resource before today. So if you have, if you could raise your hand, which again is up there by that polling feature, it's the little hand symbol under your name in the participant box. So just click that if you have seen or used this before today. All right, so I'm not seeing hands go up. So I hope if this is new, then take a look. We'd love to hear your feedback after you've taken a look to see if you're finding it helpful and how you might be using it. Fairfax is letting us know that Arlington and Prince William were also a part of developing it, so so that's great. Does anybody have any comments on this kind of a document and whether it looks like it could be helpful to you?
Kyla, I could imagine this being a great, almost like a something you could take at staff meeting, or when you have your provider meetings and talk through some of the looks like, doesn't look like examples. Have folks reflect on where they fall, on which side of the which side of the chart looks more like their most recent visits. If it was a real safe place, folks could really spend some time looking at those examples and think, which one have you done, which one, and if you've done the doesn't look like, that's okay. You've got some examples of the looks like, and you can plan for your next visit for what you might want to do differently. I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Right. It looks like lots of folks commenting, a few folks who have seen it and have found it helpful, and a lot of folks for whom it is new, but some who said they've already printed it, and others commenting that it looks like it could be helpful and provide a good review. So like I said, check it out, and if you have any comments or want to let us know how you're using it, then that will help us to help other folks. And please sort of spread the word that this is available. All right, so we really, again, appreciate you taking the time today to talk with us and share your experience around fidelity observation. We will definitely be taking a look at all of the comments from today and thinking about maybe that some sort of document or some more information around the when it's a yes and when it's a no. That seemed to be a consistent request, and I think that's something we can address. So thank you again. Have a great day. If you leave today and you think of something else that would be helpful for us to know, please feel free to email either Dana or I or both of us to share those ideas. And thank you for all that you're doing at the local level to support fidelity to coaching practices. Dana, anything you need to add?
No, I just thank you guys for joining us today and for spending your lunchtime with us. I really appreciate your feedback. We're going to save the chat, so Kyla and I will be meeting to dive into this and think more about what input you provided. So keep it coming. Feel free to, like Kyla said, feel free to email us if you have additional input, or even after today as you share this information with your staff. If they have thoughts they'd like to share, let us know. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.